let's talk about an Amazon case over here. Somebody, let's deal with live people over here. We have Jeremy here. Jeremy finds a great deal on Amazon for, let's say, a double stroller. Usually goes for $1,000, high quality, good stroller, and he finds it for $500, limited supply. Makes an order just before his summer trip with his family. Supposed to get there in time, and he gets a notice right before that it's delayed, and he's not going to get it in time for his trip. So he calls up his friend Aryeh, neighbor, and he says, I have this stroller coming. We're going to be out of town. It's an expensive stroller. Could you take it in for me, till I get back? And he says, sure. And, Aryeh inquires about the stroller and says, what's this special about this stroller? He says, this stroller, whatever, it's going for $500. Found it on this website, Amazon, whatever it was. Special deal. And I ordered one, and Aryeh says, I actually also need a double stroller. So Jeremy says, I have a great idea. I don't need it now. I'm out of town anyway. You could buy mine, and I'll just go reorder it. So they make the deal.
But then the price changed.
Didn't change. Close. So great, they make the deal. They make their kinyan. Aryeh sends $500. Jeremy's going to go redo it. Gets his family out on their trip. Aryeh got his stroller, and everyone's all set. Sure enough, Jeremy gets back on there to reorder the stroller. It's time for the right date, and it's out of stock. So the question is, I think everyone understands the question. What's the din over here? Who's entitled to the stroller? It was a limited supply, ran out. Next time it'll be back whenever it gets restocked. Might be a while. Probably go back to its regular price of $1,000. And the shiur is, who gets the stroller? Anyone have any thoughts on this?
Jeremy, I'll put it back in the box. It's all yours.
My problem was I knew there was a flaw with my story, besides the fact that I don't know if the kids' ages are right for this story, but I knew that I can't pick people that are too nice, because or else they're just going to work it out. But we're going to pretend, for the sake of the story, that everyone's very makbid, everyone's very concerned, and no one's so nice. Everyone wants to know what the din is.
He sold the stroller. Whether or not I was able to go and buy one or not had nothing to do with my neighbor. We made an agreement. He gave me the money. I gave him the stroller. That's a done deal.
Well,
Whether I buy
another
one.
money, there was no stroller. It didn't come yet.
When you paid the money to Amazon, you also didn't have the stroller.
That is true.
That's often the way sales work. You pay now and then it arrives.
It arrives. Okay, now the question is, though, it didn't arrive yet. So did you own it?
When I sold it to you.
When you sold this stroller to Aryeh, did you own the stroller yet?
So
you had a certain right. You clicked the button on Amazon, and it said it's purchased, and it said it'll be arriving soon.
So this goes back to the question of what point you acquire it.
Oh. So we know everything in Mominus, everything in transfer of ownership is dependent on the complex halachas of kinyanim, right? Of acquisitions. There has to be a specific a halachic acquisition in order for it to work. So let's make the case that you did whatever acquisition would work for this case. Besides there's a quote, Mos, the Mos are not konos. Mos means money. Money, cash is not kona. There has to be a more formalized kinyan. It's possible that cash works for other reasons, but let's say there was a good kinyan over here, right? You guys worked it out. You asked your rabbi, what kinyan do we have to do, and you did a good kinyan, right?
Amazon doesn't know about that.
So let's say the kinyan was a good kinyan.
Everyone doesn't care at this point anyways. They got their money.
But there's another problem over here. you sold your stroller to Aryeh with a good kinyan, but is it really your stroller? Meaning, you click the button on Amazon, but Amazon starts as the owner of the stroller. At some point, that is halacha considered your stroller. When you click the button, are you kinda the stroller? Do you become the owner? Did you acquire the stroller by placing that order online?
Sometimes Amazon lets you cancel the order.
Oh, so they let you cancel the order, and they won't do this often, but they also have the right to cancel the order. And it happens sometimes. Sometimes they made a mistake and they go back into inventory and they see that they don't have any, or they realize that it was a glitch in the price and they don't and they cancel the order. They have that right. So therefore, the act of making an order, paying, does not acquire the item. So the problem over here is, one of the problems with this rationale is that Jeremy, he did a good kinyan to Aryeh, but he didn't yet own it. And what's that principle about needing to own it? It's called the concept of, the way it's said in the Talmud, is einam makne Davar shelo bal olam. A person cannot acquire or have someone else acquire, sell, give something which a legal acquisition on something which the way the Gemara is talking about is that it doesn't yet exist in the world. For example, he's selling produce that's going to grow next. It didn't yet grow, but as we see throughout the Gemara, and as is brought in Shulchan Aruch right after, is that it doesn't have to be something that literally doesn't exist in the world. It means that included in that is something that's not bereshusah, something that's not in his ownership. If someone doesn't have ownership, until someone has ownership of a particular item, they do not have the ability to make sales, make acquisitions with that item. So based on that principle, seemingly over here, maybe we would say the opposite. Maybe we would say that really the sale that went on between these two was not a valid sale. So if it wasn't a valid sale, so then maybe Jeremy could still make his claim on his stroller. He has the rights to it. He has the rights to make the kinyan. He's the one that made the order. He's the one that made the payment.
But he's obliged then to give back the money.
Sorry?
The other guy gave him money. He's obliged.
Yeah, so
to
of course,
give it back.
of course he'd have to give back the money, right? Of course he'd have to give back the money.
It doesn't take so even if the original deal is invalid, extending on possession at the moment. So I come home from vacation. It's sitting on my porch, and I pick it up. Does the kinyan become obligatory at that point? So
meaning in general, when you order something.
So I bought the
So let's
stroller.
say, right, in a regular case where you're home, you order something, right? We said at the time you order it doesn't become yours yet. When it gets to your house, and either it's in your house, like we talked about before, in your courtyard that's secure, even without you knowing about it, or it's somewhere that's not secure, you do know about it, you pick it up, or whatever you do to acquire it, at that point is when it becomes yours. Over here, you weren't here to do that.
Right, but if they set it on my front porch when they delivered it, because the delivery address
so we have to get into the timing here, right? So in order to have this question, it has to be like we said the case was, is that at the time that you made your sale, it was prior to when your package was your thing was received. That's why you were going out of town and you're saying it's coming tomorrow. So it was prior to that. Now, so at this point, based on the concept of einam makne Davar shelo bal olam, that a person cannot sell something which is not in their possession, seemingly it would remain in Jeremy's right to keep it if he wanted to keep the item. However, there is another halacha that comes out in the halachas of Davar shelo bal olam, the Gemara discusses, that really what it means that the kinyan does not take effect is that the seller has a right to retract. Really, buyer also, but What really a kinyan means is that they have a right to retract. But if they don't retract, and everything goes through, then the Gemara says that it will become binding. Once it will become in the possession of the buyer, even though it started off as a kinyan which was not able to take effect, when it gets becomes ba'olam, or becomes berishuso in his possession, then at that point, the lokeach, the buyer, is able to secure a kinyan, and it becomes an irretractable deal. And the question is why. So, the Rosh and some of the other great Rishonim, they say that the idea is that it's specifically because the seller knows about it. The seller knows, right? Let's say I sell you all the apples that are going to grow from this tree over the year, right? So the sale is not a valid sale because they don't yet exist in the world, depending on how I phrase it. But I just phrase it in that simple way. It's not going to work. Then, but we made the deal as if it works, right? We made the agreement as if it works. So sure enough, you go, the apples come out, everything was fine. Take them off the tree, and now they're yours. They're in your possession. So the Gemara seems to be saying that would work. Does that need to be that I know that the apples grew in and you got them, and I didn't do anything about it? Or is it even without that? So the Rosh, and this is what the Shach brings down in Shulchan Aruch, is that rule that a sale on a Davar shelo olam, if nobody retracts, will end up being binding. That is specifically if the seller knows that it happened, knows that it grew out, knows that it became, that the buyer went and picked it up and got it and brought it into Rishus and didn't say anything. That's when you have a principle of that a person wants to keep their word. And therefore we assume that if they didn't retract, then that which they said earlier at a time where it wasn't able to take effect will take effect now. And others say that it's even stronger than that. It's even if I don't know about it, the chazaka, the leiku b'amnuse, that a person does not want to, that a person wants to maintain their word, a person wants to be known as a person with, a person in the business world wants to be known as a person with integrity, a person that keeps his word, that presumption is so strong that even if the seller didn't know about it, if eventually it got into the possession of the buyer and there was no retractions, we assume that he agrees to the sale, and even if afterwards he tries to back out, he wouldn't be able to back out.
You know, normally with Amazon, the person who buys it from Amazon will get a notice of delivery when it actually is delivered. But that's not tantamount to knowing that the other guy picked it up off your porch.
Right.
Well, but if them dropping it off on my porch counts as me acquiring it, then at that point, whether or not the neighbors come and got it is irrelevant, correct?
So yeah, so that would depend on.
Now it's in your world, so that's good enough.
It would depend on how it was dropped off. If they dropped it off in a secure, in your privately owned, not only privately owned but secure location.
Well, you tell them where to drop it off. You know, there's a standard instruction.
If they put it, let's say in your, let's say the way that it works is like an apartment building that has, everyone has their own section and it's protected and they put it in there and it's blocked out, so it's secure. So then it's something that is your place, your chutzner. Or they
lived across the street in the Morto Apartments. It's now one of these new white buildings. If you got a UPS package, it was delivered to their office, and you'd have to go get it from there.
So that would be interesting. What would be the halacha over there? Would you be, if you were a tenant in one of those buildings and you got a package, do you already acquire it when they bring it into the office for you? Because the office is not really your specifically rented space. Your rented space, which is acquires for you, is really your apartment. If they have maybe a specific cubby for your mail, maybe is that considered your rented space, or is that really just out of convenience? They're just giving you a space, but it's not really going into your domain until it gets to your apartment, possibly. But the point would be that in order for a kinyan chutzner to work, it would have to be in the person who orders their private domain, not only their private domain, but an area which is protected from the public.
So
if they just threw it on someone's porch, unprotected, seemingly it would not.
You're allowed to tell Amazon to put it in back on the deck or something like that.
So if they put it back and they throw it behind the gate or something like that, or someone put it in for them, or something small they could put in, so something like that, then it would be acquired. So it should, in this case, basically what this would tell us is that let's say before Jeremy realized that there was no more strollers, Aryeh had already went to the whole residence and picked up the stroller and acquired it. So that would be dependent on this machlokas between the Shach and the Ktos and others, that this halacha that we find in the Gemara, that a Davar shel ba'olam will eventually work if nobody retracts, is that only if the owner knows about it and is forgiving and lets it go, or is it even without him knowing about it? So that's the basic thing that will be dependent. However, there's just one more point over here that I think we need to bring up. Right, the way that we started this conversation, Jeremy said a very logical thing. And when a person makes a sale, everyone who does any type of transaction, they may have many different reasons, calculations for why they're doing the transaction, right? I might buy, a whole load of this because I think I'm doing that. You might buy a whole, 20 gallons of this paint because you think you have a deal on that building, and then it turns out that building is not really being constructed on and not being painted, and then, right, everyone has all their reasons. And what Jeremy was saying, the svara that Jeremy was saying, is that you can't go back to the other party and say, well, I was only doing it because of this, so therefore it was a mekach tos, right? The concept of mekach tos is that something which is done, a transaction which was done on false pretenses, is not considered a valid transaction. For example, if I would lead you into a false presumption about my property, right? I'm going to sell you my car. So I tell you, here's my car, it's 2016 this, and it's in good condition, and etc. You buy the car, and it turns out that there's no engine. Engine's broken. Right? That's the epitome of a mekach tos. So the sale was clearly being done with the assumption that the car has a working engine, that it was a functional car. I'm just giving an extreme example, but you could have obviously more detailed types of cases. And the halacha is very clearly that that's what's called a mekach tos. Even if every kinyan was done and everything was paid and everything was done ready, that is an invalid transaction because it was done on false pretenses. What Jeremy was saying is that if no stipulations were made, then a person can't say, well, I was only doing the sale based on information that was known to me. Right? This is right. How could any buyer, any seller, the other party, how could they be expected to know every calculation that I'm making for why I'm buying or selling stuff?
So
it's true that I didn't
have to be part of the actual transaction. You can't leave them up in the air.
So exactly. So there's a concept of a tanai that it needs to be formally stipulated at the time of the transaction. So typically that needs to be with very specific halachas of which are in great detail about what a tanai is, how it's formulated. It has to be doubled, and it has to be said in a very specific way. There are such cases where less is needed. The Gemara discusses a case where a guy was selling his property because he was planning to move to Eretz Yisrael. And the Gemara and whatever the circumstances were, it ended up falling through, and he wasn't able to move to Eretz Yisrael, and he wanted his property. And there the Gemara says the famous phrase, which is really what Jeremy was talking about at the beginning, is Devarim shebalev einam Devarim. That words that are in a person's heart, meaning things that should have been expressed, and he didn't express them, einam Devarim, they're meaningless, right? So if you're in this case, it would mean if you're making a deal with a certain expectation, then it has to be formally stipulated in the deal or in the contract, or else it's not binding. There is discussion over there that there are certain times where there's something that's so mukach, something where it's so evident that even without stipulation, some things that don't even need a tanai at all, and some things which there's a little bit of a looser requirement for a tanai. Things which have a certain certain amount of evidence to both parties that are making the deal that he's only doing it because of X, Y, and Z. So the only other factor I think we would have to think about in this deal is what would have been if Jeremy had said at the time of the transaction to Aryeh, he had said, because I'll just order another one, so I'll just sell you this one. And at the time of the transaction, he says, I'll just order another one anyway. It'll be better for me because I'm away anyway. I'm not going to use it. You're going to use it. So if he would say something like that, which makes it evident that the only reason why he is willing to make the sale is because he's going to be getting another one, that would be another complex leg onto this discussion, whether that would be valid even without a formal tanai. For sure, if it was a formal tanai, then it would work.
So if this buyer who's buying it from the Amazon customer was smart, and this thing came up at the beginning, he would say, why are you so sure you can find it available at Amazon and at the same price?
Yes. I don't know if that wouldn't really help him, but it would be helpful for his friend. Meaning for him, if the seller didn't think about it, so the seller didn't stipulate, so he has a better chance of winning the case. Well, I think what you would mean to say really is the other way, right? If the seller was concerned about losing his stroller, then the seller would say, I'm only selling this on condition that I'm able to buy a new one.
For the right price.
Right. Okay.
That would have been prudent to say that.
Yeah.
Or, just getting into practicality, sort of. He could have just told Amazon, deliver it on a different day when I'm there.
Could. In this case, he wanted to do his friend a favor.
Does it make any difference at all? So nowadays Amazon's mostly delivering their own stuff, but it used to be they delivered it via other carriers. Now they have subcontractors who are technically third-party carriers. If Amazon has transferred the good into the carrier's hands, is the carrier still Amazon's agent, or are they the buyer's agent?
That would be a good question if we were dealing with Jews. If we were dealing with Jews, then you could have a concept of shlichus. Could have a concept of an agent of A making an acquisition for B. So then you could have there is a concept that A is able to do the acquisition on behalf of C, meaning A can make an acquisition to B on behalf of C. So there would be such a question. I would wonder Meaning it would have to be that they actually were intending to do that,
Intending to
which
do
would be unlikely in these types of circumstances. But when we're talking about a non-Jewish company, there's no such concept as shlichus. A Jew is not able to appoint a non-Jew as an agent to make an acquisition take effect.
Does the Jew who's intending to take delivery when he's away, is he an agent?
Well, in this case, he was a buyer.
Right, but I mean,
He could
since
be
he already made
appointed.
the-
He could
he
be
already made the
appointed as
side
an.
deal.
He could be appointed
He
as
made
an
the
agent.
side deal, so is he been turned into an agent for the end user?
So in this particular case, he was just a regular old buyer himself because he wanted to become the purchaser of the shore. But you could have a person could appoint someone as an agent to pick something up for them, and the mishalech, the one who sent their agent, would acquire it through their agent's kinyan, even though they were not involved in it. Meaning, if you ordered something and you weren't going to be there to make the acquisition, you could appoint me as an agent, and by me doing it on behalf of you, you would become the owner, even if you were,
Right.
out of town.
Which would have been the simple way, but he wanted to help the guy out.
Right. Okay. Shkoyach, everyone.
Just go.